News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, everybody. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys and Mercy Muroki on your TV and radio and online. We're here with you until midday, bringing you live coverage of the Russian invasion of Ukraine and, of course, top commentary, as well as your opinions. A scary day.
Yes, indeed. And make sure you get in touch as well. Let us know what you're feeling and thinking about all that's going on today. gbvs@gbnews.uk is the email. We'll get to those throughout the programme. But first, let's give you the latest news.
Good morning. It's just gone 10 o'clock. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. President Vladimir Putin has launched what he calls a military operation in Ukraine. That's despite international condemnation and sanctions. Russian forces have now reportedly entered Ukraine and explosions have been heard outside the capital of Kiev. In the last couple of minutes, Boris Johnson has called the Russian military action in Ukraine a catastrophe for our continent. President Joe Biden says Moscow's actions will lead to a catastrophic loss of life. Russian military vehicles marked with the letter Z have reportedly crossed the border. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has called on citizens who are ready to defend their country to come forward, saying they'll be provided with weapons. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has insisted the EU stands with Ukraine.
We are facing an unprecedented act of aggression by the Russian leadership against a sovereign, independent country. Russia's target is not only Donbas. The target is not only Ukraine. The target is the stability in Europe and the whole of the international peace order. And we will hold President Putin accountable for that.
Ursula von der Leyen speaking there. Meanwhile, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called on Putin not to allow the situation to escalate any further.
This is the saddest moment in my tenure as Secretary General of the United Nations. In the name of humanity, do not allow to start in Europe what could be the worst war since the beginning of the century.
That as Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Pat McFadden, says the government must do more to inflict maximum economic sanctions on Russia.
sanctioning 3 people and a few small banks looks even more pathetic today than it did earlier in the week. So the government must learn from that and must step up in concert with others, with the United States, with other European countries, to inflict the maximum economic sanctions.
In other news, all remaining COVID restrictions in England end today. That means people who test positive with the virus will no longer legally have to isolate. It follows the Prime Minister's Living with COVID strategy, which also includes scrapping universal testing from April. GB News reporter Rosie Wright has more on the story.
Test positive for COVID-19 in England, and there is no longer a legal requirement to self-isolate. It's all part of the government's plan on how we live with coronavirus. Boris Johnson said it's time to move from politicians' restrictions instead to personal responsibility. We're being asked, of course, if you get the infection, to stay at home, but it's no longer legally going to be required. Other changes today: if you get on the London Underground or you take a bus, you're no longer required to wear a mask. It's all part of these plans of how we live with the infection.
Students starting university in September will now have to start paying back their loans as soon as they earn more than £25,000. That's a year. That's part of the government's response into the Auger review, which looks into funding within higher education. The current threshold for repaying student loans is just over £27,000. The UK has pledged £160 million to speed up the development of vaccines against deadly diseases. The funding will go towards preparing for future epidemics, with an aim to slash the time it takes to make a vaccine to 100 days. That's a third of the time it took to develop the first COVID jab. It'll also help with developing further vaccines to protect against future COVID-19 strains. And Britain's most successful Olympian, Sir Jason Kenny, has announced his retirement from cycling. The 33-year-old won an incredible 7 gold medals and 2 silvers since 2008. Kenny said he's sad to be retiring, but excited about his new coaching role with British Cycling. This is GB News. We'll bring you more on Ukraine and the rest of the news as it happens, but now it's back to Patrick and Mercy and to the point.
Good morning. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Muroki, and Patrick Christys on your TV, radio and online. Here's what's coming up.
Yes, a dark day, really, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? Explosions can be heard across Ukraine this morning as Vladimir Putin authorises a, quote, special military operation in the country, with many interpreting this as a Russian declaration of war.
Yes, we'll be bringing you the latest on this developing situation in Ukraine throughout the show and indeed throughout the day on this channel, including the international security concerns and how this might affect financial markets and the cost of living at home. The Prime Minister will be addressing the nation at around 11 o'clock and we'll bring you that live.
Yeah, we will exactly bring you that live, yes. And, well, earlier in the week, of course, we spoke to Thomas Jones, a British expat stuck in Ukraine as he tries to secure the necessary paperwork for him and his wife to leave the country. We'll catch up with him later for an update.
Yes, that's all coming up across the programme, and you can still get in touch as usual. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email. We look forward to hearing your views.
OK, ladies and gentlemen, well, it's a big day, this, isn't it? And there's loads of different elements of it to cover, and we intend to do the lot of it. The latest from Ukraine is that Russian forces have entered from the north, the south and the east as a full-blown invasion of Ukraine starts. There are reports of deaths at military bases as well as explosions near major cities.
Yes, well, just before 3 a.m. this morning, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a, quote, military operation in Ukraine's eastern Donbass region. He claims he's acting in self-defence to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine.
Yes, exactly. He has threatened that any outside powers who intervene will be met with an instant response from Russia, which will, quote, lead you to such consequences that you have never experienced in your history. So it's very threatening stuff, this. Civilians obviously are attempting to flee. The Ukrainian state air traffic services have closed the country's airspace as well due to high-risk situations. Now, look, we're going to get stuck right into this, ladies and gentlemen. Sir Malcolm Rifkin is the former chair of the Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament. He joins us now. This is a dark day. We're witnessing just the start of this, aren't we?
Well, what we're seeing is exactly what both American intelligence and British intelligence have been saying for the last 3-4 weeks. And you'll remember that Putin, time after time, said complete fantasy, not the slightest intention of invading Ukraine. This has all been made up by NATO, by the West, and so forth. So the complete perfidy of this man is almost unprecedented. And I think what has been important is that NATO has come together in a very strong way. We made it clear we are not going to send troops to Ukraine. It's not a war we're going to get directly involved in, but we're going to give real help to the Ukrainians. And already both the Americans and the British and other countries are providing military equipment so that Ukrainians can defend themselves. We have an obligation to do all that we can, even though we will not be directly involved in this war.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, Mark White joins us now, our Home and Security editor. So I think, Mark, this is your bag, really,
Yeah, so Malcolm, good morning to you. In terms of what next, we know that the Prime Minister is going to make an address to the UK public later this morning. What options are here? We know that we got the first tranche of sanctions that were imposed on Russia earlier this week. Is it simply more sanctions? Is there more that the UK government can do at this stage?
Well, don't look to the United Kingdom government just by itself. No, you're quite right. United Kingdom by itself cannot have an impact. But the international community, the United States in particular, has massive economic power, and it's going to be extremely robust. Now, I don't want to mislead anyone. Economic sanctions by themselves are not going to make Putin change his mind. He's not terribly interested in economics or the economy. As far as he's concerned, this is all about power, about military power, and having his will achieved. However, and there's a very, very big however, there are other things that are already happening. The German government, to its credit, has cancelled the Nord Stream project, hugely important to Russia's oil and gas energy policy. That is a very serious blow to them. Secondly, we are already providing, although we're not sending boots on the ground, we are providing military equipment. Britain is, America is, Turkey is, Poland is, other countries. So the Ukrainians will have much better means enabling them to defend themselves. And remember, we're in for a long haul here. So if Putin's objective, as it now seems quite likely, is not just to achieve some extra control in the southeast of Ukraine, but also effectively to get rid of the democratic Ukrainian government and replace them with some bunch of stooges who will do Moscow's will.
And how concerned are you, Sir Malcolm, about the potential for a real humanitarian crisis here? We know, of course, that the UK and other NATO allies have sent troops in to help bolster those Baltic countries' defences. Understandably, they're very nervous. How concerned are you about refugees spilling over the border? We've already seen thousands of vehicles trying to get out of the capital, Kiev, this morning.
No, I don't honestly believe in the short term we're talking about a refugee problem in terms of Western Europe. Yes, of course, there will be many Ukrainians who might see if they can get out of Ukraine somewhere, and Poland is their nearest neighbour, and there is likely to be movement of that kind. But remember, what we're going to see over the next few days is, first of all, the Ukrainian military are much stronger than they were 6 years ago. Now, they can't defeat the Russians, but they're 100,000 strong. That's a hell of a lot of troops. And therefore, there will be a lot of Russian body bags going back to Moscow. And all the evidence that exists is that the Russian public don't want this war. They don't understand why Russia is invading its nearest neighbor, its closest neighbor. It's almost like a civil war, we're told. So Putin has a problem on that aspect. But there will be an insurgency. If he occupies parts of Ukraine, even when the military is defeated, then you will have insurgency, as you had in Afghanistan. The Soviets were driven out of Afghanistan in the 1990s, as was America just a few months ago, by a much smaller country where people, not in a conventional sense, but as insurgents, constantly use military activity to thwart the invader. So that is what Putin has let himself in for. He's normally a very calculating man. On this occasion, I believe he's made the biggest mistake of his career.
Yes, well, you are a keen observer, obviously, of the geopolitics of that region in particular. What and this may be an impossible question, and apologies for this, but what is your gut feeling about how this might unfold in terms of, he says at the moment these are peacekeeping troops that are going into that area of the Donbass around Donetsk and Luhansk. He has also raised the prospect of actually an incursion into the wider region around there. Are you concerned, worried, do you believe that he might actually expand outwards from just that Donbass region?
Your own report shows that he's already doing that. Your own report says that Ukraine is being attacked, you said, from the north, the south and the east. This isn't peacekeeping. Yet another total distortion. The language that Putin uses couldn't be more wicked. He's a very wicked man. You're not peacekeeping when you attack a country that has never attacked you. Ukraine has not once attacked Russia. There's not a single Ukrainian missile or soldier that has sought to invade Russian territory or attack Russian citizens. It's complete rubbish. And what's more, Putin knows it's complete rubbish. So let's not use his language. It is unfair to the Ukrainians. They've got enough problems without having to explain the perfidy of Putin. What we are seeing, though, what we don't yet know, is that the attacks from the north through Belarus towards Kiev, and in Odessa, perhaps, according to some reports, these may be attempts simply to fragment the Ukrainian response. It may not be an overall invasion of the whole country at this stage. Or, on the other hand, it may be. We just don't know. The sheer numbers involved will be significant, and the ability of the Ukrainian military, if not to defeat them, at least to delay their advance, is something we will find out in the next 48 hours.
Exactly. Look, Sir Malcolm, thank you very much for your insights this morning. Sir Malcolm Refkin there, of course, the former chair of the Intelligence and Security Committee of Parliament. Goodness gracious me. Well, I mean, we didn't really necessarily think this was going to happen. It has happened, and now we're fronting up to this reality, aren't we?
Yeah, Mark, I just want to go back to you, because there are serious and real consequences that will be felt across the world, but what aren't there, and not least in oil. Oil prices surged to over $100 a barrel. Wholesale gas prices increased 33% overnight. We're really going to feel this, aren't we, here at home in Britain, as are many people across the world?
Without a doubt. And, you know, for many people, of course, that region is far away. Does it really matter to them? Well, yes, on a couple of levels. Economically, of course. In terms of stability of the region, the wider region, Europe in general, of course, it's destabilising what's happening there. The Ukraine and Russia in particular, big energy providers. You heard Sir Malcolm there talking about the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Well, there is another pipeline, Nord Stream 1, which is pumping gas from Russia into Europe at the moment. We know Germany in particular is dependent to a large degree on this energy. So the fact that they potentially might not be getting as much, it could be, we don't know how it will escalate and whether there'll be a cut-off in supplies at any point. But if there is, then that's going to push up prices even further, because, of course, you've got the energy markets at the moment very concerned and prices are rising. But if you do get a shortage in the supplies, those countries that relied on Russia to get their energy supplies are then going to be going after the same dwindling supplies of energy that the UK and others want to go after. That's going to push prices up as well. The same with food. You know, Ukraine is a very big supplier, as is Russia, of grains and corn and the like. So food prices are likely to be affected by this. But at the moment, what we're seeing, and this is the important thing to focus on, I think, for everyone at the moment, is just how this unfolds militarily in Ukraine. So we know, according to the Ukrainian government, that there has been an incursion in various parts of eastern and northern Ukraine. Is it just to try to secure this region, as Vladimir Putin spoke about? Although I think it is also important, just as Sir Malcolm said, not to, you know, play into Putin's hands by describing them as peacekeepers. That is Putin's word for these troops, absolutely not from Ukraine's point of view. These are aggressors coming into their sovereign territory. Let's see how it unfolds. in the hours ahead.
Now, Boris Johnson, I read a statement that he released, that Downing Street released, which was his comments to the Ukrainian government, essentially. And I must admit, I was a bit, not confused by it, I wasn't sure if it was right, what he was saying. He said, I hope Ukraine can resist. Well, it can't. Are we about to witness here a very messy, murky guerrilla war, essentially right on the doorstep of Europe?
Well, it's certainly, this is the big unknown. And I think we all need to sort of just take a step back, watch what's unfolding and see how it develops. Now, hopefully we've got a map of the region that we can show you that shows Ukraine, and it shows the areas which are sort of rebel held. So you can see that map. It's moving in on Ukraine, Crimea down at the bottom, which was annexed by Russia in 2014. Now, Donetsk and Luhansk are the big cities, and they are self-declared breakaway republics. What happened in recent days is that the Russian government, Vladimir Putin, recognized those breakaway republics. Now, I don't know if that map can show us as well the wider region around Donetsk and Luhansk. So there is an area which is rebel-controlled at the moment around those two cities, effectively, but the wider area around Donetsk and Luhansk is the concern here, because in statements that Vladimir Putin was making, he was suggesting that his operation may well encompass these areas, and he reserves the right to go into those areas. Now, the significance of this is that there are Ukrainian troops in those areas. So they're not Ukrainian troops in and around Donetsk and Luhansk, because these are rebel-controlled areas at the moment. But in that wider region, there are. So if Vladimir Putin and his forces push into those regions, then you have the real potential for conflict and for the Ukrainian forces to fight back in a very significant way. I should say, we're looking at pictures there of explosions. What we understand has been happening overnight, and it still is a confusing picture, is that Russia has been targeting military targets to try to degrade Ukraine's command and control abilities, to stop Ukraine coming back in any sort of meaningful military way in trying to stop those troops coming over the border into eastern Ukraine. So what exactly they've taken out, we don't know that yet. That's going to unfold, obviously.
Exactly. Mixed reports coming out. As one can imagine in this particular situation, it is by definition a very chaotic and fast-moving picture that we're looking at right now. There are some reports, of course, that there's been a military headquarters taken out in Kiev. We'll have to wait and see about that. Some mixed reports again about the impact that they've had on the Ukrainian Navy. And, of course, as well, some reports of roughly about 6 Russian jets being shot down. Russia denies this, but we will, of course, be bringing you the latest on that.
Yes, and after the break, we will bring you more coverage with international security expert Will Geddes, so stay with us for that. That's after the weather.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern. A cold and windy day for all of us, with a mixture of rain, snow and hail showers in many spots, but also some sunny spells away from the showers. The best of the blue skies will be across southern and eastern parts of the UK. The snow showers coming in from the northwest will continue. Could even see a few flakes of snow in the south mixed in with the rain and sleet showers. And there'll be some more persistent rain, sleet and hill snow for Northern Ireland, Scotland and Northern England later. Most of the snow settling, though, over hills, and temperatures down compared to recent days. 4 to 6 in the north, 7 to 9 in the south. And feeling cold in the wind, which will be particularly strong during the afternoon and evening for Northern Ireland, parts of western Scotland, and then overnight down the North Sea coast. Wind gusts of 50, 60 miles an hour. Later, overnight, the wind and the showers die away. And there'll be some icy patches to wake up to across Scotland, parts of northern England. But Friday is looking like a vastly improved day. A ridge of high pressure builds in from the south, and that tends to kill off the showers. It tends to reduce the wind speeds, and as a result, there'll be plenty more sunshine to wake up to, with Most places seeing a fine day. Still a few showers trickling into northwest England, the Midlands, perhaps East Anglia and the southwest. But these will be few and far between, particularly by the afternoon. And by the afternoon, most places are dry with long spells of sunshine, just some cloud bubbling up there in the south and some thicker cloud arriving into the northwest with some rain for western Scotland later. 11 Celsius in the south, 8s and 9s further north, so feeling more pleasant compared to today. The rain across Scotland pushes east overnight into the start of the weekend, and the winds then pick up in the northwest for the weekend with some further spells of rain in the far northwest. But for most, Saturday's looking like a fine day with plenty of sunshine.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Yes, good morning, everybody. It's just gone 10:26. This is To The Point with me, Patrick Christys and Mercy Muroki on GB News. We're live, of course, on your television, radio and online.
Yes, now some of NATO's eastern countries have triggered Article 4 to launch consultations within the alliance over Russia's attack on Ukraine. Russian troops crossed the border from the east, north and south this morning.
Yes, Poland, Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania are the member states calling for Article 4. Consultation under Article 4 can lead to collective action among the 30 member states. And we're joined in the studio right now, of course, Mark White is still with us, of course, and Will Geddes as well joins us. Thank you very much, both of you. Will, I'll start with you. How do you see this playing out now?
Well, you know, Mark and I were just having a conversation about this. I think it really comes down to whether Putin's forces move further into Ukraine or whether they stay around the Luhansk and Donetsk area. Because if they stay within those areas, which are pretty much Russian sympathizers, they want to establish their own independence, although, to be honest, it wouldn't be independent. It would no doubt be beholden to the Russian state. If they stay within those areas, then this won't obviously amplify anymore. However, there are concerns, particularly within the intelligence community, certainly some of the sources that I've spoken to, that he has a far bigger macro plan in play.
Yeah, and talking of that, I just want to read you some words from General Sir Richard Sharaf this morning, former NATO commander. He says, this is going to be about as bad as anything we've seen since the Second World War. That means that the world we live in has fundamentally changed. There's a very real prospect of this spilling into NATO territory. And he says we could find ourselves with at war with Russia. Do you think that is a reasonable assessment there? Do you think this could spill out and that there is a real prospect that actually it could spill into NATO territory?
Well, I don't think we can discount anything, Mercy. I think, bearing in mind that we all thought this was going to be like a Cuban Missile Crisis. It was going to sort of ramp up right until the 11th hour and then de-escalate. I think the fact is that NATO have to show a very, very, very unified front here. And they have to get their statement out early, and they have to be robust to say that if there was any incursion into NATO partners' territory, then obviously all the full force would happen. And then that potential forecast could be realised, yes.
Mark, I'm just going to bring you in now. And there are serious concerns, certainly it's been in our inbox as well, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Keep those emails coming in, by the way. But serious concern now that we basically might be witnessing the start of almost kind of a new world order, as it were. Now, Putin's made his move. Potentially China could do something with Taiwan as well. You know, is that what we're witnessing, potentially? I know we don't want to, like, dramatise it too much, but, I mean, it is pretty heavy stuff.
Well, yes, but, I mean, the sad reality is that new world order happened some considerable time ago when Vladimir Putin moved in and annexed Crimea, part of the Ukraine, in 2014. And then, of course, you had these areas that are now the target of these forces going in. You can see this purportedly is Crimea of Russian vehicles that are moving in. You can see the Z that is painted on the back of this.
What is that about, by the way? So
well, because the Russian vehicles, the Russian armoured vehicles, are very similar, many of them, to the vehicles that Ukraine has as well. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. So it's to distinguish for other, so you don't get these friendly fire incidents, effectively, that they can identify. It's as simple as that. They can identify their own military vehicles that are going in. So as I say, you know, the annexation in 2014 of Crimea was followed at the same time by what has now become a very protracted, low-level insurgency in that area of eastern Ukraine around Donetsk and Luhansk. They have self-declared people's republics. It was still, you know, not recognised by the world at large, but it has now been recognised by Russia. And that's why he says he's putting troops in to stabilise this region. This, of course, according to Western governments, was exactly the playbook that they envisaged unfolding here, that Vladimir Putin would manufacture in the days before this incursion into Ukraine, issues around the shelling, claims of shelling, and a humanitarian crisis in that region that would give him reason and cause to go in to help those rebel-held areas. So that's what we're seeing. But as Will mentioned, the real concern in the hours and days ahead is, does he limit himself? Still on Ukrainian soil, of course, but does he limit himself to Luhansk and Donetsk and those immediate areas, or does he, as he said, spill out into that wider area around the Donbass, which he has said he reserves the right to do?
And Will, I just want to ask you about the humanitarian aspect of this. I mean, I've seen some figures this morning, as much as 5 million, I think it was, people could be essentially forced to leave, to flee. What scale of a humanitarian crisis could possibly happen here? Because, you know, we're already seeing those scenes. For those listening to us on radio, we're looking at scenes at the moment of people essentially trying to leave. That's Kiev in Ukraine, of course, people trying to flee. What could we be looking at here in terms of that humanitarian crisis?
Well, I think, you know, to complement what Mark was saying, I think this could be immense, and it may not just involve Ukraine. It could involve, obviously, other countries which are in the region. And I think, again, to follow on what Mark was saying, what we have to watch for in this playbook are these incursions, false flag operations, potentially in other locations like Estonia, like Lithuania, on the borders of Poland. Now, this is a standard playbook, you know, for Putin. He will use groups like Wagner, for example, you know, this private military entity that is used for plausible deniability to carry out guerrilla actions. Now, if this starts creating fear, and as we've heard this morning, Lithuania has gone into a state of emergency, people may just want to flee in a preemptive move to get out of the country. So on a humanitarian level, this could be immense. So it's not just people from Ukraine, it could be from other countries also, to try and get away from what they believe to be the preamble to attacks.
Yeah, Mark, you're pointing desperately at your phone. What's going on?
Just the statement from the Prime Minister describing this as a catastrophe. Comments from him as he emerged, or at least a briefing from him as he emerged from Cobra. He's saying that he will this morning be addressing the UK public on this. He is going to speak to G7 leaders, and also he is calling for an urgent meeting of NATO leaders as soon as possible. You heard obviously some of those NATO countries in that region already trying to invoke Article 4. I think the real concern actually is the potential at the moment for a humanitarian crisis with people spilling over the borders. These are very worrying pictures, but perhaps understandable, of thousands upon thousands of vehicles, and there we have them again in Kiev, in the city centre, people just trying to get out. You can see in the other carriageway, very few vehicles actually going into Ukraine.
Way, is it?
Yeah, no, exactly. Because they have seen, since 5 o'clock this morning, Ukraine time, key installations being bombed as part of this operation, we understand, by Vladimir Putin to degrade command and control structures throughout Ukraine. It's a very worrying time for them, and you can understand why in centres of population like the capital, Kiev, that people will want to get out. It's where they go. Do they spill over the borders into some of those Baltic countries? We have put extra troops on the ground there, Will, in recent days, in recent weeks, to not just send a message, obviously, to these NATO allies in that region that we're there and helping bolster their defence, but also to deal with the potential for a humanitarian crisis.
I think the other key thing to again take that a little further forward is we've had the Forward Presence Initiative, which has been a small contingency, obviously supporting many of those countries. What we do right now, bearing in mind that we have invested, and Ben Wallace has obviously supported, putting military into Ukraine to provide training, but also to provide air defences as well. The air defences we've heard have already been taken out in Ukraine. What we do right now in Ukraine will give confidence or not to those other countries that we're providing support.
Very, very important stuff. Look, thank you very, very much, both of you. Mark White there, of course, our Home Security Editor, and Will Geddes as well, an expert when it comes to this field. Now, after the break, we hear from a British expat currently stuck in Ukraine as the country undergoes mass evacuations. But before that, of course, it's time for your headlines.
It's 10:35. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. President Vladimir Putin has launched what he calls a military operation in Ukraine. That's despite international condemnation and sanctions. Russian military vehicles marked with the letter Z have entered Ukraine, and explosions have been heard outside the capital of Kiev. 40 people have been killed so far in the attack. That's according to an advisor to Ukraine's president. Ahead of addressing the nation later, Boris Johnson has called the military action a catastrophe for our continent. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has insisted the EU stands with Ukraine.
We are facing an unprecedented act of aggression by the Russian leadership against a sovereign, independent country. Russia's target is not only Donbas. The target is not only Ukraine. The target is the stability in Europe and the whole of the international peace order. And we will hold President Putin accountable for that.
In other news, all remaining COVID restrictions in England end today. That means people who test positive with the virus will no longer legally have to isolate. It follows the Prime Minister's Living with COVID strategy, which also includes scrapping universal testing from April. And students starting university in September will now have to start paying back their loans as soon as they earn more than £25,000 a year. That's part of the government's response into the Augar Review, which looks into funding within higher education. The current threshold for repaying student loans is just over £27,000. TV online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. We'll have a full update for you with all the latest from Ukraine at the top of the hour. It's back to Patrick and Mercy and to the point in just a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Good morning, it's 10:39 and this is To The Point with me, Mercy Muroki and Patrick Christys on GB News. We're live on your TV, radio and online.
We are indeed. Now, Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky has said this morning that Russia has attacked Ukraine in a, quote, cunning way, adding that Vladimir Putin is acting much the same as Adolf Hitler did in the Second World War. Now, Zelensky added that the Ukrainian military is currently engaging in, quote, heavy fighting, fending off attacks in the Donbass, in the east, in the north and in the south. Russia invaded Ukraine this morning, and Zelensky reported the enemy has sustained heavy casualties, but warned, of course, the casualties will be, quoting again now, even heavier if they come to our land.
Yes, well, back to that developing situation and our discussions around that this morning. President Vladimir Putin has, of course, launched what he calls a military operation in Ukraine. That's despite international condemnation and sanctions. And former law enforcement intelligence analyst Ewan Grant joins us now to discuss that. Let's just get your initial reactions to what's going on. This has, of course, been bubbling for the last couple of weeks. But it's finally happened. Is this what we expected?
Well, I told your colleagues last week when I was interviewed, I thought the odds were 55-45 for an attack. People like Robert Fox of The Standard have been pointing out they are all ready to go. It just takes basically the decision. So frankly, yes, it was more likely than not.
OK, now where does this end in your mind? I know you're not a magician, I know you've not got a crystal ball, but hey, we've got to speculate a bit now. Vladimir Putin, a deeply unpredictable man, where does this end for you?
Yeah, well, if we don't speculate, we're lost, because we'll always be reacting.
Some might say we already have, but anyway.
Yes, well, yes, indeed. Question is, attacks on military units, and particularly air bases, ammunition dumps and helicopter sites, are they going on beyond Lugansk and Donetsk Oblast? In other words, are they going beyond the territory still government-controlled? And are ground troops, or particularly helicopter attack groups, attacking beyond? And within the Oblast, but beyond the ceasefire line, in other words, government-controlled people, how intensive and how deep?
Yeah, now, obviously, when you look at, for example, the reasons why we went into places like Iraq and Afghanistan, that was supposedly a bit to do with weapons of mass destruction. Turns out they didn't really exist, but also to do with, essentially liberating people. Now, let's say Vladimir Putin does kick on into Ukraine and there is a humanitarian crisis, there's heavy civilian casualties. I know they're not a NATO member. At what point do we have to look at it and go, we have to get involved now?
Well, it depends what you mean by involved, of course. How long is a piece of string?
Boots on the ground.
Humanitarian, I can't see NATO putting meaningful boots on the ground. I can see them doing something of a no-fly zone over NATO territory, both in the Baltic, where the Baltic states are very worried, and in the Black Sea, Romania and Bulgaria, to have a degree of deterrence no further, and to enable the logistics to provide humanitarian support. Boots on the ground to protect humanitarian support in western and southwestern Ukraine, probably not east of the Dnieper River.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about cyber security. The National Cybersecurity Centre has warned British firms and other organisations to take steps to boost their cyber security and their cyber resilience in response to this situation. They're not aware of any specific threats per se at this point, but they say that could change. Do you think that is a real prospect that we have to consider?
Very real. I speak for an organisation that was hacked by the Russians for out-and-out political reasons.
Right. Just expand on that, really. What kind of impact could that have? Do you think it's... Well, when's it likely to happen, I suppose?
Well, it would happen soon.
OK.
Frankly. Gradual. You notice they were gradual with Ukraine itself. They'll be gradual here. But
just out of interest, sorry, why can't we do it to them? Why can't we do it back? Why can't we? You know, why is it always the Russians cyber attacking? I'm not being funny, but are they just elite in that field?
They are very, very good. We are not helpless by any means, neither ourselves nor the United States.
OK, so are we witnessing then, in your mind, if these kind of things happen, I suppose it is another Cold War, isn't it? I mean, not for the people of Ukraine, of course, but it is essentially another Cold War. You know, cyber attack here, cyber attack there. Yes. Is that where we are?
Yes, full stop. We've been there, as your colleague, the gentleman who spoke earlier, he said, we've already been here since Crimea. This has been going on for years.
And just moving on to other impacts it could have on this country and internationally, we know, oil prices have surged over $100 a barrel this morning. The wholesale gas prices increased 33%. How much worse can this get? Because it does have to, of course, have a sustained. This does have to happen for a sustained period before people necessarily feel it in their pockets here at home. But how bad do you think this could actually get in respect to the cost of living, in respect to gas prices?
Weeks of impact, a few months, not years. The world economy is resilient, and he's got to sell stuff. And there will be other producers, obviously the Gulf states, who quietly will help. They might not say so now, but they will help.
Has Putin written off these sanctions that we're supposedly going to be hit with? Has he accounted for this? Has he got something in reserve? You know, I mean, he's taking a massive gamble here, but clearly he fancies it.
Yeah, because he's got away with it before. He got away with it over Georgia. He got away with it over Crimea. To an extent, he got away with it over the Skripals. There's still plenty of journalists parroting his line. So you made the point, I think you used the word, he's accounted for.
Yeah, he's accounted for, yeah.
I think that's the word. He can't take everything into consideration, but he's built it in. I think they've got a fair bit of resilience.
Okay.
And when the Prime Minister speaks a bit later on, he's going to be addressing the nation. What do you think his tone will be? What kinds of things do you expect him to say?
Well, he's going to be very hard. He's got no option. That is as much from his own party, the opposition, other than the fringes of politics, and increasingly in the rather belated, but nonetheless better than expected response from Germany. No, he'll be tough. He's been criticised for the relative lack of action on the dirty money, but let's wait and see. I think he's still got a few days to redeem himself on that.
Now, the West is trying to move as one here, right? Oh, it seems that way anyway. Now, could that be a hindrance? Because presumably that means if people don't want to move as quickly, we might have to hold back a bit. Is this an opportunity for us to take the lead here? You know, taking emotion out of it, as it were. This could put Britain right at the forefront of the Western response to this.
You know, Brexit and non-Brexit global Britain. We are a leader. We're not the leader. The leader, let's be clear, is the United States. But yes, we are a leader. There is quietly and not so quietly a lot of respect for our intelligence, cyber and military capabilities within the EU member states. And I think, yes, it is a real opportunity. I think we can be a major, really... But let's be clear, not the boss.
No, not the boss. However, there is a concern, and I suspect it's a reason, it's one of many reasons, it's a factor in why Vladimir Putin has done this now. You know, America, the way I look at it, it is leaderless at the moment. Joe Biden, no one can convince me this guy's running the country. Kamala Harris doesn't look like she's particularly capable either. So, you know, I'm not being funny, but when your leader, when the Western leader, i.e. America, almost hasn't got a leader, you're banging trouble, aren't you?
Yes. In a word, yes.
Right.
Yes. I wouldn't say the situation is quite as bad in America. What I would urge the Biden administration to do is bring in the grown-ups from the Trump administration, people like General James Mattis, the former Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, the grown-ups who've seen it, Mark Esper, because there were grown-ups in the Trump administration. That's probably why they didn't last long. But no, there is General McMaster. There are players. We urge him to do that.
Good stuff.
Well, Ewan, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
your insights there. Really useful, Ewan Grant there, former law enforcement intelligence analyst. But now let's just play you this clip that has come from Ukraine. It's of people crossing from Ukraine to Poland earlier this morning. They described what it was like when they first heard Russia had invaded.
At 5 o'clock, some colleague called me and say war started. And we with wife decide put all our things in the Lviv and come back here. Before that, we from Mariupol and we together moved to Lviv yesterday, and today we're here.
Hitler and all his environment have been putting on court. The same have to be done to Russia, and Ukraine is supposed to be not just only made it to be free, with the help of America, with the help of England, but Russia need to pay all economic consequences that we got during all this time.
Yeah, it really makes it all real, doesn't it, when you see that kind of human impact, I suppose, really. Now, a British expat in Ukraine, Thomas Jones, spoke to us about his issues. You may remember this guy. We spoke to him last week, actually. Spoke to him about his issues with leaving Ukraine with his Ukrainian wife on Monday.
My wife is Ukrainian. It's easy for me to go. I could leave within the next hour. The process of getting her the documentation and the visa takes some time. It's not easy. It's not easy for her to get these documents. I think they will be fast-tracked. The fee has been waived very nicely by the Home Secretary, but logistically and bureaucratically, it's not that easy. As you may know, most of the embassies, American and US and maybe others, have moved from Kiev to Lviv. Now, for me to take my wife to present her documents to an agency, which is, I suppose it's outsourced by the immigration office, we have to go to Kiev. Now, Kiev is going to be a hot zone if war happens. What I don't understand is why we would have to put ourselves in danger's way or, cut ourselves short to go to Kiev when the embassy is in Lviv.
Well, since then, Thomas has sent us this video from Lviv in Ukraine today.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Back in England. War has started. I was woken up by somebody in England sending me messages frantically around 5, 6 this morning. Switched on the computer, saw the news, and yeah, it's happening. General panic now. I went to get fuel this morning, managed to do that in time very early, but a couple of scraps broke out at the petrol station, people on edge, panic buying. Just went to get more cash at the cash point. Cash points are empty. This is going on. This is not a good situation. I really don't have words. Thank God the sirens aren't going off, because that was really unnerving me. What else can I say? Really, I don't know what to say. But anyway, thanks for everyone back in UK that's sending me wishes and seeing how I am and how the Ukrainians are and how my wife is and everything. That's really appreciated. If I can't get back to you, then I'm busy trying to make plans to get out. But thanks again.
Well, that was Thomas Jones there. Now, look, we're hopefully going to be speaking to him later on in the show. As I'm sure you can all understand, it's a very dangerous situation in Ukraine. internet connections aren't particularly stable at the moment, etc. But hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll be able to go live to him later on. Now, markets are crashing across the globe as the Russia-Ukraine crisis escalates. The FTSE 100 fell 2.5% at the open, while oil prices surged their highest level since 2014 after Russian President Vladimir Putin declared war on Ukraine.
Yes, well, Vicky Price is the Chief Economic Advisor at the Centre for Economics and Business Research, and pleased to say she joins us now. Good morning. Obviously, speaking to you under quite dire circumstances this morning, but I do just want to get your perspective as to what all of this could mean for people in Britain and their finances and the cost of living.
Well, what we've already seen, as you've announced just now, is an increase in oil prices. Gas prices are going up again after they had come down a little bit. So this suggests that, of course, costs are going to be increasing for everybody. And we've already seen what's been going on at the pumps. I mean, people are paying a lot more for their petrol already, and I think that's going to be going up. Now, the question, of course, is whether it's oil or gas. I mean, gas prices are going to be going up mainly because, of course, Europe depends very crucially on gas coming from Russia. In terms of oil, of course, it can come from all sorts of other sources. Gas as well, because we've been getting a lot more in terms of shiploads, if you like, of liquid natural gas arriving from other parts of the world. But of course, all that may be disrupted by everything that is going on right now. So there is a worry, indeed, that the cost of living is going to be going up even further. And I think that's going to also affect quite a lot of decisions that are likely to be made. We're already hearing that in the US, for example, because of all this going on, we may in fact see fewer interest rate increases in the future, even though inflation may be going up because they need to help the economy. We may see here also some reactions. Maybe the government will change its tax plans. So there is all sorts of possibilities, I think, that are coming out of this to ease that cost of living pressure, which I think is going to intensify in the next few months.
Well, we spoke yesterday. Tom Harwood, our political correspondent, of course, does the show The briefing before us here as well said even the price of beer apparently could go up because there was a lot of grain in Ukraine. It was the breadbasket formerly of the Soviet Union, of course. I mean, realistically, how long do you reckon it's going to be before people start feeling the pinch?
I think quite immediately in terms of oil prices and petrol costs, because what we know is that certainly the oil majors certainly the refineries will be doing reasonably well right now, but also we know that when oil prices go up, the prices at the pump go up very, very quickly. When they come down, they don't go down just as quickly. So I think we're going to be feeling it already, and we've seen that in the cost that people have to pay to fill a car. So that's one of them. The other thing is what happens to energy costs more generally. The expectation had been that because we had seen already some decline in gas prices recently, because they had gone up by something like 8 times, then they came down to being only up 4 times, and then maybe twice as high as they were a year ago, and so on, that the next increase that we would see in October would be a lot less because of the cap that the government sort of uses. Now, if that doesn't happen, then I'm afraid everyone will be staring at even more increases coming in the future. So I'm afraid
Vicky,
the cost is going to be increased
sorry to interrupt you, Vicky. We've got to get to these bulletins, I'm afraid. But thank you very, very much for joining us and whizzing us through that and really showing how people can actually be affected by this on a personal level, because actually, really, that's something that, frankly, everyone cares about. Vicky Price, their Chief Economic Advisor at the Centre for Economics and Business Research. Thank you very, very much.
Yes, well, keep all your thoughts coming into us on our email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We haven't had much time to get to those, but we will be getting to those very shortly, and we'll be back after this break.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern. A cold and windy day for all of us, with a mixture of rain, snow and hail showers in many spots, but also some sunny spells away from the showers. The best of the blue skies will be across southern and eastern parts of the UK. The snow showers coming in from the northwest will continue. Could even see a few flakes of snow in the south mixed in with the rain and sleet showers. And there'll be some more persistent rain, sleet and hill snow for Northern Ireland, Scotland and Northern England later. Most of the snow settling, though, over hills, and temperatures down compared to recent days, 4 to 6 in the north, 7 to 9 in the south. And feeling cold in the wind, which will be particularly strong during the afternoon and evening for Northern Ireland, parts of western Scotland, and then overnight down the North Sea coast, wind gusts of 50, 60 miles an hour. Later, overnight, the wind and the showers die away. And there'll be some icy patches to wake up to across Scotland, parts of northern England. But Friday is looking like a vastly improved day. A ridge of high pressure builds in from the south, and that tends to kill off the showers. It tends to reduce the wind speeds, and as a result, there'll be plenty more sunshine to wake up to, with most places seeing a fine day. Still a few showers trickling into northwest England, the Midlands, perhaps East Anglia and the southwest, but these will be few and far between, particularly by the afternoon. And by the afternoon, most places are dry with long spells of sunshine, just some cloud bubbling up there in the south and some thicker cloud arriving into the northwest with some rain for western Scotland later. 11 Celsius in the south, 8s and 9s further north, so feeling more pleasant compared to today. The rain across Scotland pushes east overnight into the start of the weekend, and the winds then pick up in the northwest for the weekend, with some further spells of rain in the far northwest. But for most, Saturday's looking like a fine day with plenty of sunshine.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Yes, good morning, everybody. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Muroki on your TV, radio and online. We're here for another hour, and look, we're going to be covering the very latest from Ukraine after these Russian attacks. Loads to get stuck into there.
Yes, we'll get to your views as well throughout the last hour, but first, let's give you the latest news.
Good morning, it's 1 minute past 11. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. President Vladimir Putin has launched what he calls a military operation in Ukraine. That's despite international condemnation and sanctions. Russian military vehicles marked with the letter Z have entered Ukraine, and explosions have been heard outside the capital of Kiev. Earlier, Boris Johnson called the military action a catastrophe for our continent. NATO envoys have agreed to strengthen air, land and sea forces on its eastern flank near Ukraine and Russia. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has said the country is being hit by a second wave of missile strikes.
The Ukrainian armed forces were involved in heavy fighting, repelling attacks in Donbass and other regions, east, north, south. The enemy sustained serious losses, and the enemy will sustain many more losses. They came on our land. We're already handing out weapons, and we'll hand out them to defend our country to everyone who wants and has the capacity to defend our sovereignty. The future of Ukraine depends on every citizen.
Meanwhile, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called on Putin not to allow the situation to escalate any further.
This is the saddest moment in my tenure as Secretary General of the United Nations. In the name of humanity, do not allow to start in Europe what could be the worst war since the beginning of the century.
That, as Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury Pat McFadden said, the government must do more to inflict maximum economic sanctions on Russia.
Sanctioning 3 people and a few small banks looks even more pathetic today than it did earlier in the week. So the government must learn from that and must step up in concert with others, with the United States, with other European countries, to inflict the maximum economic sanctions.
In other news, all remaining COVID restrictions in England end today. That means people who test positive with the virus will no longer legally have to isolate. It follows the Prime Minister's Living with COVID strategy, which also includes scrapping universal testing from April. GB News reporter Rosie Wright has more.
Test positive for COVID-19 in England, and there is no longer a legal requirement to self-isolate. It's all part of the government's plan on how we live with coronavirus. Boris Johnson said it's time to move from politicians' restrictions instead to personal responsibility. We're being asked, of course, if you get the infection, to stay at home, but it's no longer legally going to be required. Other changes today: if you get on the London Underground or you take a bus, you're no longer required to wear a mask. It's all part of these plans of how we live with the infection.
Rosie, right there. The Queen has cancelled more planned virtual engagements today in the wake of her COVID diagnosis. That's confirmed by Buckingham Palace. It follows other virtual meetings which were cancelled at the start of the week when it was said the monarch was still suffering mild cold-like symptoms after testing positive for coronavirus on Sunday. The Palace report Her Majesty will continue with light duties, adding there were no other engagements planned this week. Students starting university in September will now have to start paying back their loans as soon as they earn more than £25,000 a year. That's part of the government's response into the Augur Review, which looks into funding within higher education. The current threshold for repaying student loans is just over £27,000. The UK has pledged £160 million to speed up the development of vaccines against deadly diseases. The funding will go towards preparing for future epidemics with an aim to slash the time it takes to make a vaccine to 100 days. That's a third of the time it took to develop the first COVID jab. It will also help with developing further vaccines to protect against future COVID-19 strains. And Britain's most successful Olympian, Sir Jason Kenny, has announced his retirement from cycling. The 33-year-old won an incredible 7 gold medals and 2 silvers since 2008. Kenny said he's sad to be retiring, but excited about his new coaching role with British Cycling. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens, including the latest from Ukraine. Now let's return to Mercy and Patrick, and to the point.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Muroki, and Patrick Christys on your TV and radio and online. Here's what's coming up.
Well, a new development actually. Explosions have been heard across Ukraine this morning, as you can hear the siren going off there as well. Vladimir Putin authorises a, quote, special military operation in the country. And, of course, there's many interpreting this as a Russian declaration of war. We will have a little bit of an update for you as well, as apparently there is a developing situation, basically, regarding the missiles.
Yes, we're covering this throughout the show, including the international security concerns and how this might affect financial markets and, of course, the cost of living here at home. The Prime Minister is expected to speak imminently as well, so we'll be bringing you that.
Yeah, we have all of that coming up across the programme. Of course, get in touch with us as well, gbviews@gbnews.uk. We haven't had much chance to go through them yet. As you can imagine, it's a fast-moving show, this, but keep them coming in. Yes, now President Vladimir Putin launched what he calls a military operation in Ukraine. That's despite international condemnation and sanctions. Russian forces have now reportedly entered Ukraine and explosions have been heard outside the capital, Kiev. Now, Prime Minister Boris Johnson, I believe these are live images, I think. Yeah, they are live pictures there, as you can see, obviously. Something burning, essentially, in Kiev, I believe. Just outside Kiev, anyway, maybe. And obviously, Boris Johnson's going to be addressing the nation, so we'll be bringing you that as and when it happens. But, Mark White, look, I'm just going to throw over to you because you are, of course, our Home and Security Editor. What's the latest, please?
Well, the latest is that we are getting reports from the Ukrainian government saying that there is now a second wave of missile strikes that are underway. An initial barrage that happened early this morning at 5 a.m. Ukrainian time as Vladimir Putin launched this operation. I don't know if we can take that picture in full frame, but you can see these pictures are from the capital, Kiev, other news outlets with similar pictures as well. We don't know exactly what that is. It's a pile of something that appears to be on fire at the moment. And so we should just add the caveat that we don't know if this is linked to the missile strikes that are coming in. It may well be, but what exactly it is, I don't know. We are getting reports as well of a missile strike on Bovary, which is a city on the eastern suburbs of Ukraine. The mayor is talking about 6 people dead. Ukrainian authorities putting the total throughout the country at the moment, at least at 40. But these numbers are changing all the time, and it's a fool's game to try to keep up with them in any meaningful way. We can only report what the Ukrainian government is putting out.
Well, on that, the Ukrainian government has, from what I've read anyway, claimed that they've shot down 6 Russian planes. Look, obviously, we won't know the full facts of that. Russia is denying it. Or do we know anything about Russian losses at this stage?
No, we don't. It's very early days in this. I think what we're witnessing at the moment are missile strikes that are coming in designed, I'm sure, to take out command and control facilities throughout Ukraine to ease the way, obviously, for Vladimir Putin's troops to cross en masse into that area around Donetsk and Luhansk, the areas that he recognised as breakaway republics. These are rebel-held areas. There has been an insurgency that the Ukrainian military has been fighting at a low level, really, with these rebel groups, really since 2014, since Russia annexed Crimea. But he has recognised them. He says that he is moving in with a view to stabilising this region. That's what he claims. Western governments obviously say that's just absolutely nonsense, that he has manufactured this crisis, that this is very much the playbook of Vladimir Putin, that there would be this information war that would suggest that the people in that region were coming under fire from the Ukrainian military, and certainly we've got lots of reports coming out of that, and we can see actually a fire engine that appears to be pulling up there, and there's a couple of people in military fatigues, but as I say, what exactly that is, we don't know, whether it is a military installation or not. We think, as I say, that they have been targeting military installations, part of the command and control operation that the military throughout Ukraine would be operating.
Well, Mark White, thank you for that update. I'm sure you'll be back to update us on anything else that comes out of this situation. But let's now cross to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who's joining us live from Downing Street. Good morning, Tom. We mentioned earlier that the Prime Minister is expected to speak very shortly. What are we expecting him to say?
That's right. The Prime Minister will be recording an address to the nation, as it has been termed, that will be coming out this morning, we expect. It will broadly be not the detailed policy announcement that we're expecting. Of course, there are all sorts of rules with regard to what must first be decreed in Parliament if it's something in terms of policy, which is why in so many, for example, COVID press conferences, what we'll see is an announcement in Parliament first and then an announcement from Downing Street afterwards. The fact that something is coming from Downing Street first and then the Prime Minister is addressing the House of Commons at 5 p.m. today, so quite a lot later really, suggests that his announcement will be one of broad brush strokes rather than specific policy. It will talk about the direction in which we need to go and be a message of solidarity really to the people of Ukraine, of course a Western liberal democracy that has been invaded by an aggressive Russia. This will be a moment to allow the country into the mind of the Prime Minister, into the broad brushstrokes of what's going on. But the interesting thing is, it will be 6 hours until the Prime Minister addresses Parliament. Why might that be? Well, we know that Downing Street has been very, very clear over the last few weeks even that its sanctions response to Russia has been highly and tightly coordinated with Western powers. London has been talking to Washington, has been talking to Brussels, and in general the NATO powers have attempted to walk in lockstep. Potentially, the fact that the Prime Minister is not speaking until later this afternoon suggests that they're waiting for the Americans to be awake to make sure that everything is still in line, that the West continues to present a united front against Russian aggression.
Look, absolutely. I mean, to be fair, though, this could actually be an opportunity for Boris Johnson to stand tall on the world stage and really actually take the lead in this now, couldn't it? Do you think he has actually, if we take all emotion of the actual, practicalities of the realities of an invasion into another country, from a political point of view, this could be a great opportunity for Boris Johnson, couldn't it?
Certainly, and we saw on Tuesday that when Boris Johnson addressed the House of Commons announcing that first tranche of sanctions, some sanctions that some, actually many in the House of Commons, ended up saying was really quite too little. But even then, on Tuesday when the Prime Minister stood up in the House of Commons, he had a greater air of authority than he has done in the last weeks and indeed months. There was a greater sign of respect really for the Prime Minister in the House of Commons at the start of this week, and indeed in Prime Minister's questions just yesterday there was little back and forth ding-dong between the Leader of the Opposition Keir Starmer and Boris Johnson. There was one little back and forth over party funding, which was pretty much a score draw, but outside of that, really what was going on was a broad sense of agreement across the House, at least in the direction that must be moved rather than the specifics, and that's something that aids Boris Johnson. He looks more like a statesman. He is appearing much more prime ministerial, and that is being reflected not just on the respect he's seeing from his benches, but actually the respect by which he is listened to from the benches opposite as well. No doubt the gravity of this situation will mean that the weightiness of the occasion will continue in the same vein later today.
And Tom, we've been covering over the last week or so the level of sanctions that the NATO alliance and the NATO members have been basically discussing and contemplating in response to Putin's provocations. We've already had some sanctions announced. I mean, what can we expect right now, now that this has happened, in terms of sanctions that might be imposed on Putin? And will they even make any difference at this stage?
Well, that is the big question, of course. We know how Russia has been cozying up to China in the last half decade, how whatever financial sanctions we may effect if Putin can actually finance his debt through Chinese on those individuals around Vladimir Putin. Putin's of Ukraine on Tuesday. Perhaps. Those particularly the West since 2014, since Putin first sanctions. What do those sanctions do, though? Even though the Russian economy may be crippled, and let's not forget.
Very, very shortly. Tom Harwood there, of course, outside Downing Street. We are
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern. A cold and windy and eastern parts of the UK. The snow hill snow for Northern Ireland, Scotland and Northern England later. Most of the snow settling though over hills, and temperatures down compared to recent days, 4 to 6 in the north, 7 to 9 in the south, and feeling cold in the wind, which will be particularly strong during the afternoon and evening for Northern Ireland, parts of western Scotland, and then overnight down the North Sea coast, wind gusts of 50, 60 miles an hour. Later, overnight, the wind and the showers die away, and there'll be some icy patches to wake up to across Scotland, parts of northern England. But Friday is a vastly improved day. A ridge of high pressure builds in from the south, and that tends to kill off the showers. It tends to reduce the wind speeds, and as a result, there'll be plenty more sunshine to wake up to, with most places seeing a fine day. Still a few showers trickling into northwest England, the Midlands, perhaps East Anglia and the southwest, but these will be few and far between, particularly by the afternoon. And by the afternoon, most places are dry with long spells of sunshine, just some cloud bubbling up there in the south and some thicker cloud arriving into the northwest with some rain for western Scotland later. 11 Celsius in the south, 8s and 9s further north, so feeling more pleasant compared to today. The rain across Scotland pushes east overnight into the start of the weekend, and the winds then pick up in the northwest for the weekend, with some further spells of rain in the far northwest. But for most, Saturday's looking like a fine day with plenty of sunshine.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe.
Yes, good morning, everybody. It is 11:20. It's to the point with me, Patrick Christys and Mercy Muroki. We're going to go live now to Stoltenberg, who's obviously Secretary General of NATO. Let's hear him.
Peace on our continent has been shattered. We now have war in Europe on a scale and of a type we thought belonged to history. We have just finished a meeting of the North Atlantic Council to discuss the situation. The Council also addressed the request by Bulgaria, the Czech Republic, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania and Slovakia to hold urgent consultations under Article 4 of the Washington Treaty. This is a grave moment for the security of Europe. Russia's unjustified and unprovoked attack on Ukraine is putting countless innocent lives at risk. With air and missile attacks, ground forces and special forces from multiple directions, targeting military infrastructure and major urban centers. This is a deliberate, cold-blooded and long-planned invasion. Despite its litany of lies, denials and disinformation, the Kremlin's intentions are clear for the world to see. Russia's leaders bear full responsibility for their reckless actions and the lives lost. NATO allies condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine in the strongest possible terms. It is a blatant violation of international law, an act of aggression against a sovereign, independent and peaceful country, and a serious threat to Euro-Atlantic security. We call on Russia to immediately cease its military action, withdraw its forces from Ukraine, and choose diplomacy. We fully support Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity, and Ukraine's right to self-defense. Russia is using force to try to rewrite history and deny Ukraine its free and independent path. NATO's core task is to protect and defend all allies. There must be no room for miscalculation or misunderstanding. An attack on one will be regarded as an attack on all. This is our collective security guarantee. Today, the North Atlantic Council decided to activate our defense plans at the request of our top military commander, General Todd Walters. This is a prudent and defensive step to protect and shield allied nations during this crisis. And it will enable us to deploy capabilities and forces, including the NATO response force, to where they are needed. In response to Russia's massive military build-up, we have already strengthened our collective defense, on land, at sea and in the air. In the last weeks, allies from North America and Europe have deployed thousands or more troops to the eastern part of the alliance and placed more on standby. We have over 100 jets at high alert, protecting our airspace, and more than 120 allied ships at sea from the high north to the Mediterranean. All this shows that our collective defense commitment, Article 5, is ironclad. We will continue to do whatever is necessary to shield the alliance from aggression. I have called a virtual summit of NATO leaders tomorrow to address the way forward. Russia is now facing severe costs and consequences imposed by the whole international community. The Kremlin's aim is to re-establish its sphere of influence, rip up the global rules that have kept us all safe for decades, and subvert the values that we hold dear. This is the new normal for our security. Peace cannot be taken for granted. Freedom and democracy are contested by authoritarian regimes, and strategic competition is on the rise. We must respond with renewed resolve and even stronger unity. North America and Europe together in NATO. We are an alliance of 30 democracies standing as one. We will protect our people and our values. Democracy will always prevail over autocracy. Freedom will always prevail over oppression. And then I'm ready to take your questions.
We'll go to Interfax Ukraine.
Thank you, Anna. Interfax Ukraine, Irina Sommer. Secretary General, we all know that NATO will not fight for Ukraine. But don't you think it's time for NATO to build anti-Putin coalition? Thank you.
NATO stands in solidarity with Ukraine, and NATO allies are imposing severe costs on Russia for the reckless invasion of Ukraine. NATO allies, in close coordination with the European Union and other partners all over the world, are now imposing severe economic sanctions on Russia to demonstrate that we follow up on what we said, and that is that it will be a high price for Russia to pay. NATO allies have also over a long period of time provided support, practical support, military support to Ukraine, and helped them to build a much stronger, much better equipped, much better trained armed force today than the Ukraine had in 2014. And I would like to recognize the professionalism and the bravery of the Ukrainian men and women in uniform who are now standing up against the Russian invasion. So we continue to stand together, condemning the Russian full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and allies stand together also in sending a message that we will never accept the brutal violation of international law that we see taking place as Russia now invades Ukraine.
We'll go to Bloomberg.
Do you have any information that shows that NATO allies face a direct threat from Russia at the moment? And would NATO reconsider military intervention in Ukraine? Thank you.
NATO is the strongest alliance in history. And make no mistake, we will defend and protect every ally against any attack and every inch of NATO territory. And that's the reason also we have increased our presence in the eastern part of the alliance with thousands of more troops, ships and planes over the last weeks. To send a very clear message that an attack on one ally will trigger the response from the whole alliance. And we do so not to provoke a conflict, but to prevent a conflict. What we do is defensive, it's prudent, it's measured, but it is necessary because we see the aggressive actions of Russia against Ukraine, and therefore allies also have to make sure that there is no room for any misunderstanding about that Russia can do anything like that against a NATO allied country.
National Public Radio.
Hi, thank you. Terry Schultz with NPR and DW. Mr. Secretary General, in the NAC statement, you say that we're deploying additional defensive land and air forces to the eastern part of the alliance, additional maritime assets, and increase the readiness of forces. Is this now, today, more forces being sent as a result of the fact that the invasion has now happened, or are you there referring to what has already been done as reinforcements? I understand SECOR will now have the ability to assemble the VJTF without coming back to the NAC for approval. And finally, are you still willing to sit down with President Putin or other representatives of the Russian government after this? Or are you suspending your offer to hold talks on other issues and the NATO-Russia Council? Thank you.
This invasion doesn't come as a surprise. We have warned against it for months. And sadly, what happened this morning during the night was something that Allied security and intelligence services have predicted for a long time. We have tried to prevent it by calling on Russia to engage in diplomatic efforts, by telling Russia that there will be severe costs, economic sanctions, if they invade Ukraine further. But what happened over the last hours, what has happened over the last hours, demonstrate that Russia, despite our diplomatic efforts and despite our clear message of economic sanctions, decided to once again invade Ukraine. But since we have been warning against this for a long period of time, we have also taken prudent measures to prepare ourselves. And that's the reason why we, over the last months and weeks, have significantly increased the presence of NATO troops in the eastern part of the alliance. More land troops, ground forces, but also air and naval forces. In the coming days and weeks, there will come even more. So we will further increase, and we are increasing, our presence in the eastern part of the alliance. And today we activated NATO's defense plans that gives our military commanders more authority to move forces and to deploy forces when needed. And of course this could also be elements of the NATO response force. So we are ready, we are adjusting our posture, but what we do is defensive, is measured, and we don't see confrontation. We want to prevent the conflict and any attack against any NATO allied country. Well, we have reached out to Russia for weeks and months, and what we have seen is that the Russian message has been that they actually have never taken these talks seriously, because while we were trying to find a political solution, they were planning for this invasion. And while we were trying to find a political solution, they were actually day by day, week by week, increasing their military presence and readiness on the borders of Ukraine, and now the launched invasion. So Russia has shut the door to a political solution. We regret that, but that's sadly the reality, which has severe and very serious consequences for the people of Ukraine, but also actually impacts the security for all of us. And that's the reason why we step up our presence in the eastern part of the alliance.
Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung.
Thanks a lot for taking the question. Secretary General, actually two questions. The first one, I'd like to hear your reaction to what President Putin said this morning when he announced the military operations. He said that any country that interferes with them would face consequences greater than you have seen in your history, which I take as a veiled threat with a nuclear attack. So please, what is your response to that? He did not specify what interference means. And the second question, very simple, can the NATO-Russia Founding Act be upheld under these circumstances? Thank you.
The threatening rhetoric by President Putin and the aggressive actions by Russia, of course, is the reason why we are saying that we are now faced with a new normal for our security. And we need to consult closely all allies, and we will also do that tomorrow when the leaders meet at the virtual summit. What does this mean for our longer-term relationship with Russia? How shall we continue to defend and protect allies in this new security reality? And how can we make sure that we uphold the values we believe in, freedom, democracy, faced with a more aggressive authoritarian regime in Moscow? A regime which is willing to openly contest our values and to threat and actually also use force to try to coerce other nations. So this will have some long-term effects on our security, on how we respond, on how NATO is reacting, and also on how our relationship with Russia can evolve. We don't have all the answers today, but there will be a new reality. It will be a new Europe after the invasion we saw today. And therefore I welcome the fact that we are so closely coordinating, so closely working together in NATO. We stood together in warning against the Russian aggression, the plans. We stood together in reaching out to Russia and tried to prevent the attack. And now we need to stand together in responding to the attack. And that's exactly what we are doing. That was the first question. The second question? Well, that's part of this new reality we have to look into. And there will be a different reality, and we need to respond. But this is not the day to draw the conclusions. But we will have an important discussion among leaders tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you for the question. Mr. Secretary General, today Ukraine has called on Turkey to close the Bosphorus and the Dardanelles Straits for Russian vessels. Is that an action that was discussed in this morning's meeting, and are there other similar actions that have been discussed today?
That was not discussed in the meeting today. Turkey is, of course, a NATO ally. Turkey has a special role when it comes to the Bosporus Straits, but this was not an issue in the meeting this morning. What we discussed this morning was the need to activate the defense plans. We made a decision to activate those plans, which enable us to move forces more quickly to where they are needed, and also to agree a statement where we express a very strong condemnation of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and also announced that we are going to have a NATO summit, a virtual NATO summit tomorrow.
Wall Street Journal.
Dan Michaels, Wall Street Journal, thank you for the question. Could you talk a little bit more about the activation of the defense plans? What exactly does this change? And when was the last time this was done? Thank you.
These plans are plans we have developed over the years to make sure that we have plans in place to react to crises like the crisis we are faced with now. And they are defensive plans, they are prudent plans, and they are plans that covers the whole east of our lines, from the Barents Sea down to the Mediterranean, and they give our military commanders some more authorities within politically defined guidelines and frameworks to deploy forces where they deem it needed, and that's exactly what we have agreed today. So these again are defensive plans, ensuring that we have forces at the sufficient readiness at the right place throughout Europe.
Have they ever been activated before?
So I don't know whether it's right for me to answer that question, because I don't know whether it has been made public before, so I only said that we activated them today.
Associated Press.
Hello, Mark Carlson, Associated Press. Is the NATO response force inside Ukraine right now?
No, there are no NATO combat troops, no troops, NATO troops at all inside Ukraine. We have made it clear that we don't have any plans and any intention of deploying NATO troops to Ukraine. What we have made clear is that we have already increased, and we are increasing the presence of NATO troops in the eastern part of the alliance on NATO territory. Ukraine is a highly valued partner. We have supported Ukraine for many, many years. We helped them to build a more modern, capable armed force, military. We have helped them to train, equip, and in many different ways strengthen their armed forces. We help them with cyber defenses, NATO and NATO allies in different ways. But we don't have NATO troops in Ukraine, and we don't have any plans to send NATO troops into Ukraine. But we are there to protect and defend all NATO allies. So we support Ukraine. We provide absolute security guarantees for NATO allies. And we demonstrate that commitment by increasing the presence in the eastern part of the alliance.
We'll try to take a couple of questions online before we come back to the press room. So we'll go to Steve Erlanger from New York Times.
Thank you, Secretary General. Two quick questions. One, do you still have military deconfliction contacts with Russian forces today? Are those ongoing? And secondly, a lot of NATO countries are going to want to keep supplying weapons to Ukraine. Do you foresee this as a major risk of NATO-Russia conflict? And where else do you see risks of conflict now between Russia and NATO countries that could spill over into something worse? Thank you, sir.
We have increased the presence in the eastern part of the alliance, and we have activated NATO defense plans today to make sure that we do not see any spillover to NATO territory. Because as long as Russia knows that an attack on a NATO ally will trigger a response from the whole alliance, they will not attack, because we are the strongest alliance in history. And as long as we stand together and make clear that we are committed by our collective defense commitments, that's the best way to prevent any attack, any spillover from the tragedy, the heinous attack we see in Ukraine, spillover onto any NATO allied country. The NATO allies have provided support to Ukraine in many different ways over the last years, especially since 2014. NATO has helped them with the cyber defenses. We have also helped them with some different trust funds for different activities, and then on top of that, and different capacity building measures, help them to strengthen, including the naval forces and other elements of their armed forces. But then on top of what NATO has done as an alliance, NATO allies have also provided military equipment, including defensive weapons and other types of support training. It will be a national decision in what way allies continue to provide support. So that's for individual NATO allies to decide. Deconfliction is extremely important for us. There has been contacts between our military commanders and Russia. We'll continue to reach out to them to make sure that we do everything we can to ensure deconfliction.
We'll next go to Helsinki Sanomat, Teija Sutinen.
Yes, this is Teija Sutinen from the newspaper Helsingin Sanomat. What is your message to the partnership countries, Finland and Sweden, in this situation? At least in Finland, there's a discussion about the possible NATO membership, but is this realistic during a crisis? Thank you.
Finland and Sweden are very close partners, and I have taken careful note of the very clear message both from Finland and Sweden, that even though they don't apply for membership now, they strongly believe that NATO should not sign any kind of agreement with Russia based on what Russia has proposed for us, to sign a legally binding agreement ending any enlargement of NATO in the future. So I've seen that Sweden and Finland states that for them this is a question of self-determination, the sovereign right to choose their own path, and then potentially in the future also to apply for NATO membership. So for me, the very clear messages from Finland and Sweden just has underpinned how important it is that NATO allies do not compromise on core values, including the right for every nation to choose its own path, meaning whether it wants to belong to NATO or not belong to NATO. NATO respects those decisions, regardless if it's yes or no to joining NATO. We very much value the close partnership with Finland and Sweden. It's important for NATO, it's important for Finland and Sweden. I visited Finland and Sweden this fall together with North Atlantic Council, and we see how closely we work together, exercise together, increase our ability to operate together, interoperability, and we also have very close political consultations. And therefore, I have invited Sweden and Finland to the virtual summit tomorrow, the NATO summit tomorrow. So at the NATO summit tomorrow, we will have Sweden, Finland, and the two EU presidents present, showing in a way the very strong unity we demonstrate, transatlantic, NATO, and also close partners, EU, Finland, and Sweden.
We'll go to Polish radio.
Beata Płomecka, Polish Radio. If I may, follow-up question to Terry's question. When exactly is high readiness element of the NATO response force may be deployed? Is it up to the leaders if you convey the summit for tomorrow? Thank you.
First of all, we have already deployed thousands of troops. And for instance, to Poland, there are more US forces, there are more forces from the United Kingdom, and there are also all the nations deploying more forces to Poland, and also to other countries in the eastern part of the alliance. More ships in the Baltic Sea and more planes conducting air policing and protecting our airspace. So this is going on, and there will be more forces in the east of the alliance over the next days and weeks. Then that could include elements of the NATO response force, but the most important thing is not exactly which elements or which forces, but the most important thing for Poland, for the other allies in the eastern part of the alliance, is that there are more NATO forces in the east. And there is, and there will be even more NATO forces in the east in the coming days and weeks.
Final question to TV2.
Okay, right. Okay, well, of course, that was a press conference there at NATO. A lot of interesting pieces of information to come out of there. There's a virtual meeting, apparently, between NATO members tomorrow. I've got some questions about that, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, you would have thought that maybe they'd do it today, but anyway. And also, I thought the Secretary General of NATO it was interesting. He didn't say categorically that there wasn't evidence of a Russian threat to other NATO nations. Mark White joins us now, our Home Security editor. Mark, your thoughts?
Well, this is the real concern about the potential for this becoming a wider conflict. I should say we're looking at live shots there of the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, with reports of a second wave of missile strikes that have come in to the country, targeting, we're told, a military airport near Kiev, various other targets which we believe are key to Ukraine's command and control structure. We're told that Russia, according to Ukrainian military sources, has been using Grad missiles, also attack helicopters. Now, as always, you know, we've got to be cautious with a lot of the claims and counterclaims. All we can do really is cite where they are coming from. So Ukrainian military officials telling Reuters that they have shot down 3 attack helicopters, Russian attack helicopters, that were involved in attacking this military airport near Kiev. I'm also hearing that to go to the issue, the wider issue that you asked about other NATO countries, Lithuania, of course, a NATO ally, has declared a state of emergency. And looking at those pictures, you know, Hosmil Airport, so I think this is a military airport near Kiev, and you can see absolutely it looks like I'm assuming those were Russian military aircraft, and they were firing effectively decoy devices as they were going along, that they come out to deflect missiles that come their way. You know, you'll often get heat-seeking missiles that go after an aircraft. They target the engines of an aircraft because that's where the heat signature is. So they fire off all of these kind of chaff, if you like, to distract the missile. So that looked like what was happening with these attack helicopters coming in. That, again, a feed there from Reuters that showed a missile strike. So it's underway, this second wave, apparently, according to Ukrainian authorities. Lithuania, as I just said there, have declared a state of emergency because they are very concerned about the potential for this conflict, if it is a full-scale invasion on Ukraine, for it to spill over into their borders. Already this morning, we have been seeing refugees leaving Ukraine, crossing the border into Poland. Now, this will have a direct impact on the likes of British forces who are in these Baltic countries, the NATO allies in that region. They're there to bolster their defences, to reassure understandably very nervous NATO allies at this time. But also, potentially, they might have to deal with a humanitarian crisis if there is a significant number of people who start fleeing over the borders. And already we have very dramatic shots of Kiev earlier today that showed thousands of cars just leaving the city, trying to get out of clearly what they believe is a line of fire.
Yeah, I'd like your opinion on something, actually, because the very first question was from a Ukrainian journalist. This was at the NATO press conference. And she was basically saying, look, you're not going to obviously send in troops here. We're not a NATO country. What are you going to do? And aside from saying he's assisted with various military equipment and all of this stuff, he said he was going to chair a virtual meeting with NATO leaders tomorrow. Why isn't it happening today, do you think? I mean, the Ukrainian citizens will not be filled with confidence at the idea that they cannot get around a table or virtually even until tomorrow.
So the logistics of that, we don't know, but you're talking about world leaders, 30 different countries who, they could be anywhere and doing anything today to get them together. I suppose it's a bit like herding cats. So clearly the earliest they can do that effectively, they believe, is tomorrow. It's going to be a virtual conference. They're not going to be travelling to Brussels for this NATO summit, so they'll do it virtually. She said they could have done it today, you would think. But tomorrow is the plan for that. In terms of the wider involvement of NATO in Ukraine, it's not going to happen. The sad reality for Ukraine is, which is what is fueling a lot of the unrest that we're seeing now, is that it's not a NATO member. Vladimir Putin does not want it to become a NATO member. If it was, then it would be a very different scenario we're looking at. So all we're doing at the moment is economic sanctions.
Yes, well, Mark White, thank you for bringing us that update. And let's just, before we leave you, go to our political correspondent, Tom Harwood, who's joining us now from Downing Street. Tom, the Prime Minister is expected to to address the nation later on. Tell us when we can expect that and what he might say.
Well, we're expecting this address to the nation, which has been pre-recorded, to come out to us at noon today. So not long now to wait to hear the Prime Minister's words. What will he be saying? This was likely to be a broad brush stroke picture of where we are and what the government is thinking. I think it's unlikely in this particular address that we will hear the detail of policy moving forward, because of course there is that convention that policy is announced in the House of Commons before it is announced from Downing Street. We've seen that with COVID press conferences and the like, first announced in the House of Commons and then announced in the street in which I am currently. So what we can expect probably is an overview of what the Prime Minister thinks, a message of solidarity to the people of Ukraine as well. And then it's 5 p.m. That we need to wait for until the Prime Minister is on his feet in the House of Commons, talking through exactly what the UK response will be in terms of policy. That's the likelihood. But we know noon today for that address to the nation, and then 5 p.m. for that address to Parliament.
Tom, thank you very much. Obviously, you'll keep us abreast of the situation, as it were, from outside Downing Street there. Just in case you are just joining us, of course, we've heard from the Secretary General at NATO, who was doing his own press conference as well. He said there's going to be a virtual meeting of NATO leaders tomorrow, obviously strongly condemning what Vladimir Putin has done. He said Europe is now in a war, and that he didn't categorically rule out that there wasn't any threat to other NATO nations posed by Russia. And as you heard from Tom Harwood there, of course, as well, we are expecting a pre-recorded statement from Boris Johnson, who is going to obviously, you would imagine, outline the UK's position on all of this before he addresses Parliament as well.
Yes, and stay with us here on GB News, because we will be bringing you the latest updates on that Russian invasion of Ukraine throughout the day. And up next is Gloria De Piero. To the point, we'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m.
See you.
Hello again, I'm Aidan McGivern. A cold and windy day for all of us, with a mixture of rain, snow and hail showers in many spots, but also some sunny spells away from the showers. The best of the blue skies will be across southern and eastern parts of the UK. The snow showers coming in from the northwest will continue. Could even see a few flakes of snow in the south mixed in with the rain and sleet showers. And there'll be some more persistent rain, sleet and hill snow for Northern Ireland, Scotland and Northern England later. Most of the snow settling, though, over hills, and temperatures down compared to recent days, 4 to 6 in the north, 7 to 9 in the south. And feeling cold in the wind, which will be particularly strong during the afternoon and evening.